Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing great out there. I've been working on a bunch of videos lately. This is one of them that's coming out, and I'm going to be trying to kind of expedite this project and kind of keep it moving because we did get a bit delayed. For those of you that follow the channel, we started part one way back, I think at the beginning of summer sometime. And well, you know how summer is. Gets in the way, vacation, work, doing other projects, a lot of outdoor stuff, mowing, taking care of the property, all sorts of stuff. So, hey, just got real busy with that. And this kind of got kicked to the curb. And, well, sometimes, you know, that sort of thing just happens. But we're back on it now. I just spent the past 2 hours fiddle farting with the press, getting everything kind of tuned the way I want, getting all my dies set up and everything. And so I think we should be pretty good to go on that one. Also, I had a few pieces of brass that already had primers in them, so I kind of used those to get all the dies basically set up the way I wanted, and already loaded up some test rounds for what we're doing here. So I'll be shooting those tomorrow just to make sure that everything is going good before we go into full-scale production. So in this video, I thought we'd kind of go through in terms of what we're going to go ahead and use for this. So in terms of the components, we've got power pistol, which we talked about in the first video. I've used this very successfully with this load. It works very well. I've done thousands of these before. We are going to start at a lower powder charge than what I usually use, and we will work our way up kind of as, you know, typically you should do with reloading, because it's been a couple years since I've done it. So I just thought for the benefit of you guys, we'll start kind of at a little bit of a lower load, kind of work our way up. Then the other thing in terms of the brass, basically our brass, we already did this quite a while ago, but basically the brass is kind of a mix of nickel brass, Lapua brass actually from Finland, and also Winchester and a few other bits and bobs. The other thing that we did with this too was we swaged the brass as well. So the primer pockets are all nice and clean and swaged and everything, just to make it easier to load the primers on the progressive press. Hopefully that shouldn't be an issue. Then for bullets, we're using Speer 124 grain TMJ bullets. So those have worked very well for me. Essentially the TMJ is kind of a harder plated bullet, so they say. I haven't had any problems shooting them at higher velocities, which we are going to be aiming for a bit of a higher velocity on this, since it's kind of, I guess you could say, kind of submachine gun ammo, kind of what we're looking for. Something with a little bit of kick. So that's going to be the components we're using. And then also in this, let's go ahead and adjust the camera here a little bit. Let's talk about the die setup that I'm going to use. So what I've decided to do with this is I bought a while ago, and I've used them before. They work pretty good. Let's see if the camera can get that. Let me back the camera up here a little bit. The Redding Titanium Carbide Pro Series 9mm dies. These are designed for progressive presses. Essentially, I guess it has kind of, a beveled edge or something that makes it easier whenever you're running a progressive press. I think that's kind of the idea with them. But I've used them, you know, loaded thousands of rounds. They work pretty good. The only thing is, it comes with basically a seating die, not a seating die, resizing die, seating die, and then also your taper crimp there. So the one thing for me in terms of kind of how I run this is, so we had to kind of add a couple things, and I'm also kind of thinking about even changing this perhaps. So let's just start with the resizing die. Basically the way I set this up, you know, run my ram all the way up, screw the die basically all the way in till it makes contact, but we don't want to you know, have the press cam over or anything like that, so it's just making contact with the plate just ever so slightly. That's the way I set it up. The other thing too, in terms of like the capping pin, I pretty much have that taken out and kind of have that backed out because that's not a concern. One thing that I love to do with my brass, and a lot of y'all might do it a different way, but I love, before I get to the press, deprime those suckers off the press and swage them if I need to, and then that way I don't have to mess around with dirty primers on the press. So that's one thing with that. That's the way I like to do it. That way I don't have to goof around with it here on the press. So the decapping pin is basically out, so that's the way I run that. The next thing is we have our primer tube there. I'm thinking for primers, we're probably going to run the S&B small pistol primers. And maybe perhaps if that doesn't work too well, we can always switch to the CCI primers. So we have two options there for that. Probably start with the S&B, see how those work. We'll obviously be doing some test firing, all that sort of stuff, and we'll see how it goes. If I need to switch primers, I'll switch it up and change primers. The next thing is that I have a Lee from my Lee 9mm set. I have a Lee expanding die. Okay. Now, one thing Hornady makes with their whole powder measure thing is they do this thing called the PTX expander. I found myself the PTX expander wasn't worth a damn. Okay. I played around with it a bunch, all that. No luck. I didn't like it. I don't want to use it. It just didn't work for me. Okay. So we're going to run a Lee expanding die. Time honored Lee die, works just fine. Everything's good. Then I'm just going to do my powder here separately. So we have that all set up. I did have to play with the linkage a little bit. The other thing that I noticed on it was one of the screws had kind of loosened up. And that's one thing with progressive presses that, for those of y'all out there that, everyone says, hey, get a progressive press, all this stuff, and all that. You do have to watch them because as you kind of go through the motions and you're using these things, a lot of things like that can kind of get out of adjustment after you go through thousands of rounds. Things loosen up. Just like your shell plate and stuff. I've had the shell plate before loosen up on me and all that sort of thing. And I actually made a video last year, about a year ago, on maintaining this press to keep it running good. So that's one thing that I noticed was that screw kind of came loose, or whatever. So we don't want to affect, obviously, the powder charges or anything like that with this thing moving up and down or around or whatever the hell it's doing. So got everything all tightened up, got everything dialed in, and then periodically, the other thing too, maybe every 100, 200 rounds, we'll check the powder charge just to make sure everything is still sweet. Now that it's set, it should be fine, but we'll just double check our work. So with that. Then we have our Redding seating die, so got that baby dialed in. Basically, the recipe I'm going to go off of is in the Speer manual. So they have a whole recipe there for their 124 grain TMJ bullet for 9mm. So we have everything set here. And again, we'll check it just to make sure. But we're going to go ahead and use the overall length that they suggest and just roll with that. So we'll just use that. Okay. So we have that all dialed in. That should be ready to go. Now, this is the one thing I'm kind of debating over using. I have used this Redding taper crimp die before. Seems to work okay. However, I love my Lee factory crimp die, so that is something I'm kind of weighing up. Do I want to stick with this and roll with it? I have loaded thousands of rounds of 9mm with this. I've loaded tens of thousands of 9mm with the Lee factory crimp die. So, the 9mm I've loaded with this before and crimped with it seems to do okay. I'm kind of debating whether I want to change that out or not. So I'm not quite sure. I think since I already have it set up, I'm just going to go ahead and run with it for right now. and then leave it open if I feel that I really do need to change it up. So, you know, we'll kind of see how that goes. The other thing too is we have, let me just adjust this down a little bit here. Remember, if you the video I just released recently, got a new table here, so everything should be nice and stable with everything that we're doing. So shouldn't be any complaints about that, so we should be good to go. So that's pretty much the setup there in terms of everything that we're running. All right, folks, so we already ran into an issue, which, hey, it happens in reloading, and I'm kind of not surprised in a way. So one of the things that kind of cropped up here real quick is the primer tube and all that kind of jammed up. And I've had this problem before with S&B primers. And also, too, I had issues with having difficulty actually seating the primers on this press as well. Now, one of the things that I found, I've mentioned this before in other videos and stuff, is there actually are slight dimensional differences between European primers and American primers. And I'm not talking about Berdan and all that stuff. I'm talking about regular, you know, regular boxer primers. European primers are actually just ever so slightly bigger. And so with that, it seems to give the tube here on the Hornady, the slide and everything, a little bit of some fits. I think it's just a little bit more of a tighter fit than perhaps, say, like a CCI primer or whatever. So not the first time I've run into this, but it already jammed up. Right now it seems to be working okay, so we'll go ahead and continue and kind of see how it goes. But it won't surprise me if it does give me some further issues. So probably we're getting to the point where we're near at the end anyways. I only put 20 primers in, so that one seemed to seat okay, so that's good. So probably what I'm going to end up having to do is I'm probably going to have to just go to CCI primers and just call it a day. And then, you know, what I can do with these S&B primers is, you know, I can use them in other projects and just seat them, you know, using my regular hand primer or whatever, and, you know, different other things, and kind of use them up that way. So, you know, we'll kind of see how it goes. But anyways, so kind of a little bit disappointing because I would like to see it jammed up again. And oh, okay, so now it's working. So we're good. So the slide kind of jammed up there. So perhaps, you know, there's a modification maybe to make to the slide or something. I don't know, but, you know, I'll tell you this. I mean, most of the time anyways, I like CCI primers. I've never had any issues with them at all. And, you know, that's just my preferred primer overall. So, you know, it kind of just is what it is. And let's just double check. Yep, so yeah. So that worked. So I think we'll go ahead and we'll finish out these in terms of the primers that I loaded in the tube there. And then, you know, I think what we'll do is we'll end up switching to the CCI primers after I shoot this batch. And we'll see if we have problems. I suspect not, because I've never had any problems with CCI primers or running them on this press either. So, and I think I felt one seat there. Yep, so that worked good. So happy with that. But so what's the plan here? Well, so what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm just going to kind of take these out. I haven't actually been able to do any shooting at the range. The weather here was super nasty in December, and we had tons of rain, well, tons of snow, slush, ice, all that. And then we've had this weird thing for the past week where it's warmed up, all the snow is melted, and it feels more like April 1 rather than January 1. So a little bit odd, but the good thing about it is that it's kind of cleared out the range, so I can actually use the range without any hindrance or anything. So we're either out of primers or is that jammed up? Yep. I think we're out of primers. So anyways, so that's the plan, is I'm just gonna shoot these and yeah, and just make sure everything is functioning good. And then we'll get into actually doing some chronograph testing. And probably we're gonna end up bumping up the powder charge too, I suspect. So that's gonna be kind of the game plan. So anyways, folks, stay tuned. This project, it's back on track again, which is a good thing. And so once we finish this 9mm project, we're going to be moving on and doing some other 9mm projects as well with some different powders and bullets. So that'll be coming up later once this one is all complete. And we have our 32 ACP project. We have a 300 blackout project we're starting soon. I got some product reviews coming up and all that good stuff. So stay tuned, folks, and we'll see you shortly for the next installment. Have a good one.